County Fair cruising. Coming up on Grow, our tour of county fairs continues with a visit to Adams County. Also a look at how 4-H kids are beating the heat with their animals. Plus cattle in the danger zone. We'll visit a large feedlot to see how they care for their livestock. And drought tightens its grip on Nebraska. Conditions are worsening. We'll see how it's impacting irrigation. Get ready to grow. Extreme heat bears down on Nebraska, putting cattle in the danger zone. That's our top story. We begin the program with a visit to Broken Bow.
The animal welfare is of utmost importance for what we do here.
Streams of water spray into the pens at Adams Land and Cattle.
We run 2-minute cycles, and it takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to get all the way across the yard.
With the cattle heat index near emergency levels, feedlots do what they can to limit the effects of the scorching sun.
There's two things that we can't really control, and that's markets and weather, and so weather is something we really pay attention to.
The combination of heat and humidity can be deadly.
Every year somewhere in the Midwest, a heat event that kills a fair number of cattle is likely to occur if you don't mitigate it somehow.
Some employees work overnight to avoid handling cattle when the sun beats down.
Our processing crew is running from midnight until about 10 in the morning versus a day shift, and a little different than what they're used to the rest of the year.
When there's little relief at night, it can take a toll.
Those cattle do not get to cool off at night, then they just start into another hot day.
Troy Walls says cattle need about 2 gallons of water for every 100 pounds of weight.
So if you have a 1,500-pound steer, they're going to need 30 gallons of water a day during this time.
In addition to sprinklers, water trucks keep the dust down and spray pens if needed. They also try to keep cattle from bunching together, which raises their temperatures even more. Kyle Vanderpool says they look at every animal every day.
Just looking for signs of heat stress, and if we need to ramp things up a little more or back things off. If cattle tend to go off feed, we'll back them up rations to add a little more roughage to kind of maintain the rumen health.
And communicate with those who background cattle for them.
If we've got any resources we can send their way or suggestions, things like that, because that helps the whole industry.
With 80,000 head in this lot alone, Vanderpool says it's about protecting their investment, but also about animal welfare.
Everybody's on board and understands it's just part of the culture in the cattle feeding business and the culture at Adams Land and Cattle.
That heat hits during county fair time. We're here this week at the Adams County Fair in Hastings. And as we head into the beef barn, NTV's Andrea Braswell has more on how kids and their animals are beating the heat.
Cooling off in the shade after competing for a purple ribbon. Volunteers say these animals are just as hot and thirsty as we are, so animal owners must pay attention to the signs.
It breathes a little bit slower than it usually breathes.
Haley Reinstein is 12 years old. She says she hydrates Meredith by giving her lots of water throughout the day.
The heat is always a concern, especially in the middle of July at county fair time.
So volunteers say they are keeping the place cool and comfortable.
We also have lots of fans blowing on them as well, and try to make it a very environment that is as cool as we can make it.
But organizers aren't the only ones being held responsible. They say owners must play their part too.
People who bring their livestock to the fair, they are very conscious about that and make sure that their animals are hydrated and giving them plenty of water.
Unfortunately, Tricia Danberg says animals have overheated in the past.
There have been times when an animal did get too hot and it wasn't the best situation for that animal to be shown at that time.
And 10-year-old Ellie Reinstein says she knows the feeling. It happened to 4-month-old Cookie.
We were putting it in front of the fan for it can cool down, and you need to give it a lot of water.
But volunteers say it doesn't have to get that far if you give your animal frequent sips of water.
Just always making sure that there's an opportunity for them to have a drink.
The Adams County Fair is certainly known for its concerts, but also its beef. The county 4-H educator says central Nebraska is cattle country, and that's evident with strong livestock shows. And just as it was generations ago, he says the county fair is still a place to celebrate hard work on the farm. So he laughs when people ask him about the concerts.
Who's the performer? And my response is, it doesn't matter what it happens at the nighttime, it's what the activities or what the kids are doing during the day, because That's true, the backbone of the county fair.
If you've missed it, we've been on the road. We're calling it County Fair Cruisin'. So keep watching to see what fairs we may show up to next. And with this heat, many are limiting their pivots as a cost-saving measure. Here's more on irrigation load control.
That rain was a lifesaver.
The 4th of July brought more than fireworks in the sky. Farmers celebrated the rain.
Didn't have much rain in June there, so we was hot and heavy irrigation starting in the middle of June all the way through.
And that drives electrical demand up.
When farmers are irrigating, we can see our loads approximately double from what we would see during a normal time of the year.
Public power districts try to limit those peaks because it affects the rates all customers pay.
We pick usually the 4 highest usage days. That actually is part of the formula that makes up your electric rates. So if we can keep those down, that means better rates for everyone.
So many farmers agreed to limit irrigation during peak times.
The load control helps out a lot just because it's a little bit cheaper rate, but if you do have a breakdown on a pivot and you're down for a day and you get it up and running, the next day's your load control, well then now you're starting to go backwards on things, and it's hard to get caught back up once you get behind.
And that load control kicked in earlier than normal.
We actually started controlling in the middle part of June this year. It's just been really hot and humid out there, so we needed to start that a little sooner.
For farmers like the Grievings, they can barely afford to irrigate, but certainly can't afford not to.
We got all the inputs in it already for our inputs, so we'll put the last little bit of irrigation in it just to keep things going so we can pay the inputs back, I guess.
With the return of drought, it could be a costly summer without rain.
Just a little help so we can keep the pocketbook closed a little tighter, hopefully this year.
Something we may not think about, but migrant farm workers face many unseen risks. NTV's Carmen Montez has more.
If you're depressed and if you're really stressed, you look for ways to kind of cope with that stress and with that sadness or that depression that you may have, and sometimes people turn to substances.
Athena Ramos and other researchers are traveling through central Nebraska to find out what health challenges migrant farm workers face out in the field.
We found really high rates of depression and stress, and also substance use.
31% of migrant farm workers were found to be stressed, 40% reported to be smokers, and 43% could be considered to have a drinking problem, according to the study. Their findings from last year say that some workers were injured out in the field, but never sought out medical help due to the cost, among other challenges.
You have to deal with the lack of providers, of healthcare providers, and especially if you're talking about culturally and linguistically appropriate care, it becomes even more challenging.
Alexander Chapa, a lead for the migrant farm workers in Hastings, says they do see workers dealing mainly with depression, but they find unique ways to keep their minds off certain issues.
Sometimes get depressed because they want to talk with their family, but they, on the fields, they try to just make fun and do things that maybe you wouldn't imagine.
Some of that fun, he says, is dancing and singing to make the month they are here go by faster. Alexander's dad is a contractor, and he says that due to the change in the climate, from cold mornings to really hot afternoons can also affect their health.
When you have a changes like that, the people sometimes get like a flu, stuff like that.
Ramos says that this population of migrant farm workers is an invisible population and says it's important to get this information out to the public.
So we're trying to bring light and shed light on the concerns that may exist among this population.
A leader in egg manufacturing celebrates a major expansion. Orthman opening a new facility in Lexington. Here's more.
Orthman's new facility is about $2 million, 115,000 square feet, and 6 years in the making.
It's a huge growth and a huge new opportunity with the new walls and the people that we have working for us is just fantastic.
The company is celebrating its 50th year in the business with a ribbon cutting and a speech from Lieutenant Governor Foley. The new facility was built to expand Orthman's production services.
Wash is an automated process, as well as we have a cure oven, which essentially accelerates the curing of the coating or the paint, and that makes the parts handleable sooner
and provide new opportunities for the community.
Our intent is to add a whole bunch of jobs here. So when we started this project in 2010, at that time we were anticipating that our employment would be going to 500 employees. Well, with the ag challenge that we were in, we aren't quite there yet. So, but over time we expect that we will be able to add 100 to 200 jobs now.
The Ag Challenge CEO John McCoy is referring to is the slow ag business, which affects their product sales. But he says despite the ebbing and flowing ag cycles, he's not too concerned.
Historically, there's never been a time when we haven't come through an ag cycle that we weren't a better company on the other side, and we're fully expecting that to be the case this time as well.
In Lexington, Natalie Martinez, NTV News.
And a toast to the diversity of Nebraska agriculture with a growing wine industry.
There's a lot of work and a lot of expense before you ever start getting a return.
A return you could be waiting on for years, according to the co-owner of Old Cellar Vineyard.
It takes 3 years before you get any production. It takes 5 to 7 years to get full production.
Thompson says he began his vineyard in 2010, but getting into the business wasn't always this popular.
It was not practical for them to venture into something risky like a vineyard and a winery.
Paul Reed is a professor at UNL. He's also an expert on wine and grape production. Reed says even after the Prohibition repeal in 1933, farmers didn't think it was smart to sell grapes.
The Dust Bowl years, and so farmers had to rely on price supports for commodity crops just to stay in business.
Then after the Dust Bowl came World War II, and he says the grape business just wasn't lucrative enough for farmers to take on.
It wasn't until 1986 that the Nebraska legislature's Farm Wineries Act went into effect.
That's when laws helped these farmers establish a market. And he says people begin to realize it was something they could benefit from.
I think we have 34 or 35 licensed wineries in Nebraska now.
Here at the Old Cellar Vineyard, Thompson says they're now using less pesticides to grow their grapes.
By using ozone, it is not harmful to the environment, it's not harmful to the people.
Something he says a lot of smaller vineyards can't do. But experts say for larger operations, it's cost effective.
It's money savings to the grower. But as I say, it's also environmentally responsible.
Still to come, managing your finances in difficult times. We'll hear from the experts. Later, a check on the drought monitor. Stay with us.